You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, Christiana Figueres, the woman who brokered the landmark 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, tells Sky News the UK needs to follow the example of the United States in tackling climate change. US climate envoy John Kerry is in China for climate talks ahead of a key summit of world leaders next week. And why the UK's woodlands are under threat from our changing climate. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world right now and meet those coming up with the solutions. This show aims to take you to the heart of the climate crisis, explain the data driving the changes that are already affecting us, but also show you just how far we've come. Now, we've spoken already on this show about our data dashboard and in particular this number here. Now, this shows how much human activity has warmed the planet since the Industrial Revolution, and you can see it's ticking up every single second. Now, the aim is to keep that to well below 2 degrees, preferably at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now, 196 parties signed up to that in the Paris Agreement in 2015, the most important global commitment to tackle climate change. And the person who oversaw those negotiations and the agreement that followed is Christiana Figueres. As the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, she was instrumental to the success of the COP21 summit and the Paris Agreement. Later this year, nations are due to gather in Glasgow for COP26, the most significant summit since Paris, because all countries have been asked to submit their new long-term goals to cut emissions. Today, the conference's president, Alok Sharma, told MPs the UK is working hard to ensure that it can go ahead, despite the COVID-19 pandemic. Earlier, I spoke exclusively to Christiana Figueres and started by asking if the UK is doing enough to cut greenhouse gas emissions.
It's very important to differentiate two roles that the UK is playing at the same time. First of all, Alok Sharma is the incoming COP president, and as such, he cannot take a UK position. He needs actually to detach himself, if you will, from the UK position and from what the UK does to be able to be the correct and neutral COP president that he needs to be. He is doing a brilliant job of that. On the side of that is the UK government, different than the role of the COP presidency. And the UK government is currently in process of struggling, frankly, to align all of the policies that are in the energy sector, in the transport sector, in all of the sectors that they need.
So what do you think needs to change about the UK's policies?
The UK needs actually to take a look at what the United States is doing. We had 4 years of darkness around climate change in the United States. And what the United States has done now is not just dovetail itself into where the world is on climate change, but actually take a step forward and give a very, very clear mandate to all agencies, to all departments, that they are to do their domestic job, but they need to do it through the lens of climate change. So the United States has actually come from behind to the front. It is today the only country that is having an all-of-government approach to climate change. That is something that the UK, but also every other country can and should emulate.
Individuals in the UK, for example, might say, look at China, it's responsible for a quarter of all emissions. Any individual decision I make here is going to make no difference, so why should I?
Well, it is true that China currently has 1/4 of emissions, but let's remember the historical responsibility that the UK has, having been the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, which is exactly what got us into this situation to begin with. That is why it is so important that the UK has actually engaged already years ago in phasing out of coal and moving toward renewable energies. That's why it's so important that the UK has assumed a net zero target in its national law, because the UK understands that they need to change the course. Now, individuals are a very important part of that, because we collectively as individuals, but collectively, we represent demand in the economy. And so when we as individuals demand clean, efficient, non-polluting transport, then corporations take note and provide that. When we as individuals demand non-emitting food that is better for our bodies and better for planetary health, corporations take note and develop more options that are with plant-based protein. When we as individuals demand cities that are actually organized for pedestrians, for humans, and not necessarily for cars, bridges, and roads, then urban planners take note and make the necessary changes.
And you can see our full interview with Christiana Figueres on Sky News' YouTube channel. And you can hear more from her on our weekly podcast, Climate Cast. That's out this Friday, and you can find it wherever you normally get your podcasts from. Now, let's take a look at some of the day's other climate news now. And an environmental engineer is launching a legal challenge to the government's decision to exclude waste incinerators from its post-Brexit emissions scheme. Georgia Elliott-Smith claims the decision is at odds with the UK's target to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. Over 11 million tonnes of waste was incinerated in England in 2019. Norway has asked Brazil to show that it can reduce deforestation after Brazil asked them to resume donations to help preserve the Amazon rainforest. Norway had been one of the biggest donors to preventing and monitoring rainforest destruction, but they froze their payments after a surge in deforestation since President Jair Bolsonaro's election in 2019. Meanwhile, the EU has been named as the second largest importer of tropical deforestation, according to the WWF. Latest figures from 2017 show it was responsible for 16% of deforestation associated with international trade. Only China was responsible for more, at 24%. Soy, palm oil and beef were the products imported into the EU that were the biggest contributors. A National Weather Service station in Massachusetts, which monitors atmospheric conditions, has been abandoned over fears it could fall into the Atlantic Ocean. Until recently, the research station in Cape Cod was around 100 feet away from the cliff edge, but a series of storms last year accelerated local erosion. And European bison could help combat forest fires associated with climate change. The species went extinct in Spain 10,000 years ago, but are now being reintroduced to the country to help clear forests of fire-fueling undergrowth. The fires have been associated with the climate crisis, as well as declining sheep herding, which traditionally helped to clear forests. US climate envoy John Kerry has arrived in Shanghai for talks with his Chinese counterpart. That's all ahead of a virtual summit of world leaders, which President Joe Biden will host next week on Earth Day. Now, China is the world's biggest polluter, and today new analysis has been published showing which countries generated the most power from coal last year. Now, in terms of electricity generated by coal, China leads the way with 4,631 terawatt hours. That puts them at the very top. So here are the top 10 countries, with India next, then the United States and Japan, all the way down to Australia in 10th place. Now, the UK doesn't even make the top 25 countries. But look how big the gulf is between China and the rest of the world. And in fact, if you added up everyone else in the top 10, you'd get just over half of China's coal-generated electricity. And that's one of the reasons why engaging with China on the issue of climate change is such a priority for John Kerry. So let's bring in our correspondent, Mark Stone, who's in Washington. So, Mark, what can John Kerry hope to achieve with these talks in China?
Well, I think a key achievement will be getting Chinese President Xi Jinping to actually attend the virtual summit, the Earth Day summit next week. He hasn't yet confirmed that he will do so. So clearly, if John Kerry can work his diplomacy to ensure that the Chinese president is there, that itself will be a coup. Don't forget that Chinese-American relations generally at the moment are very, very bad. And so the fact that John Kerry has managed to make this visit is in itself an achievement. The Chinese are very, very aware that they don't, or very wary of being lectured to by other countries about what they see as internal issues, things like Hong Kong and others. But I think the advantage for John Kerry here is that he can say, look, this isn't an internal issue. Climate change is a global issue, and he is not lecturing to the Chinese, because he can also say, we, the Americans, are as bad or almost as bad as you are the Chinese. So this is a collective problem that we need to engage on. So I think the Americans are framing this as a separate issue. Yes, we have differences elsewhere, but on climate change, we're all in this together.
Mark, thank you. The UK's woods and trees could be approaching a crisis point due to climate change. A report from the Woodland Trust says the UK needs to plant many more trees if we're to save our woodlands and the creatures that live there. Our reporter Milena Veselinovic has the story.
Britain's woods are places filled with magic, but this fragile habitat is under threat. Land development, climate change and pollution are encroaching on it, and scientists say consequences could be dire.
We could start to see species extinctions from some of our woods, but also just the experience that people have in woodlands is going to be much less rich. So you're going to go into woodlands and you're not going to be able to see all the spring flowers anymore. You won't be able to hear the birds anymore.
A new report by the Woodland Trust says only 7% of native woods in the UK are in a good condition, and nearly all exceed thresholds for nitrogen pollution, a byproduct of farming. But keeping the woods healthy is key to the future of the planet. This ancient wood is more than 400 years old, and trees here capture carbon and store it for centuries. They could be one of our greatest allies in the fight against climate change. Trees and plants are second only to the ocean at generating oxygen.
They actively sequester the carbon dioxide from our atmosphere and gather it and store it within their bodies. This is really, really important towards the fight against greenhouse gas emissions.
Experts say we need to quadruple the amount of trees we are planting to give nature a chance of recovery. If we don't, they say, there's much to lose. Milena Veselinovic, Sky News.
And that's everything from us on the Daily Climate Show for today. Next time, can a food supplement for cows really reduce the amount of methane they produce? Find out at the same time tomorrow. See you then.